Good evening, Team Impact. Tonight we're doing John Ortberg's book. If you want to walk on water, you have to get out of the boat. And we're discussing chapter 7. And he's talking about our fear of failure and the doubts that creep into our mind. If you remember when Peter's in the boat and he says, "Ye of little faith, why do you doubt?" We all have those doubts that creep into our mind. Sometimes it's, can I do this? Do I really think I'm as good as our jewels or as our diamonds? Truth is, we can, and we just got to get over, the 6 inches between our ears. Often when we're young, the author says when we were young, failure doesn't seem to impact us as much. When we learn to walk, when we ride bikes, when we want to participate in kickball or basketball, we just dove right in. We didn't worry about failure. We didn't worry about, oh my gosh, I don't know how to dribble a basketball. You just do it. But it's so funny, as we get older, those doubts creep into our minds. Can we really do it? Sometimes we focus too much on the negative message after our reach out, or we dwell on our new join that maybe we're all excited at first and then nothing. And we allow those doubts to creep into our mind. So why is it that for some people in life, failure is energizing? And then while others, it can be paralyzing to us. Like I said before, we allow those doubts to creep into our mind, and then we stop with any sort of action. People's perceptions and responses to failure can have an enormous difference in our lives. And if you go back to what the Bible says and what David was in the cave, he could have dwelled there. And in fact, he was wandering around in the wilderness for 10 years. But God, he was there with David the whole time. Can you imagine what it was like for David? I mean, he actually had people speaking about stoning him to death. We don't have to worry about that in our lives. So how do we find our way out of that cave, our own cave of discouragement? One of the things the author says is to name that fear or discouragement or that experience that we had. Put it into words and realize what it is and give it that name so that way you can analyze it and move on. And the author says in the cave, God is there with us. He's with us the whole time. And you're surrounded. You're in God's protection. You're in the confines of God's cave. He's there for you. And knowing this, you can be fully honest with God about what your fears are. If it's fear of resentment or fear of that, you're just going to fall flat on your face or someone's going to send you a nasty message on Instagram. It's like, really, what are the fears? But we get that stuck in our head. And then he says, taking action. And we've heard this too from our jewels and our diamonds, take action. Often we wait for some sort of outside force to act upon us. Like it's going to happen. Like your new join is going to call you up and say, "Hey, I've got 6 people that are ready to get started. What do I do next?" That reality is not going to happen. We ourselves have to take that action. We have to do the reach outs. We have to put that vulnerable post up. Also, when we're trying to read my own notes here. So whatever arena we're in, whether it's our home, our work, our plexus business, the single most destructive thing that we can do is inaction, not do anything. You listen to our diamonds and even recently Eric Worre, some of his calls, messy action is better than no action at all. Inaction leads to shame. It can lead to paralysis, avoidance, procrastination. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. I'll feel more energized tomorrow. And then that just spirals downward. We just can't seem to get past where we're at. I like the example the author gives and he's talking about marriage. And I think all of us here, we can relate to that, right? We're all married. And if there's an area in our marriage that we want to focus on and improve it just by 10%, take action with that, whether it's connecting on an emotional level, whether it's communication or intimacy. Take that action and your efforts will pay off. And through that, we get hope, right? All of a sudden, we start seeing that little efforts pay off, and that allows that discouragement to start fading away. Action or hope will always over trump discouragement. So pick an arena that you want, an area that you want to focus on. When it comes to your plexus business, we've heard this from our upline and our jewels. Maybe if you're struggling with reach outs, pick a couple and do it today. If you're struggling with follow-ups, work on that and then chart it over time. Put it in your planner or write it in your calendar that today I'm going to follow up with so-and-so, and then do it again tomorrow. And then a couple days later, maybe you do 2 follow-ups. Customer care, if you're struggling there, make that a focus area. Being at in-person events, if that kind of scares you, sometimes what am I going to do? Like I mentioned before on one of these calls, when I was going to the Grand Rapids event, I had never met any of you in person. This was a little scary, but hey, I did it, and now I'm registered to go to the barn event. So another area that I kind of struggled with initially, especially was handling the objections. I didn't know how to do that when somebody would say, well, I don't have enough time for this, or the cost is overcoming. I would just go, oh, okay, and then move on. And then you learn over time, okay, how do I handle that objection? And now it's not nearly as scary. So failure can be a tremendous motivator too. He's reminded of saying of the, or no, I'm reminded of a saying sometimes that the only change, the change of staying the pain of staying the same is when that is greater than where you're currently at, you will change. So like I said, if you want to change, you gotta get past the pain of where you're at right now. And there's another reminder that the author had, and I really like this because it's a visual. When we're afraid of our own rejections or a message that we put out there, use this as an example, because we think maybe getting a no is painful sometimes, but he had 5 of the best-selling authors out there, and these are recent 20th century books out there. You had Richard Hooker's MASH, rejected 21 times by the publisher, and I love that show. I don't know how many of you watched that, but turned out to be a huge success. Dr. Seuss, his first book, To Think I Saw It All on Mulberry Street, rejected 23 times. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, you're putting all that effort into writing a book, and you're going to publisher after publisher after publisher, and it's no, 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 no. And J.K. Rowling, 12 times to a publisher. And I don't know how many of you seen Harry Potter or read the Harry Potter books, but those are wildly successful. In fact, I think she became a billionaire because of those books. So think of that, when we get one no, how many times did these authors go to publisher after publisher and the rejection that they felt? So did you guys catch or get to look at that, the story about descending the mountain, and how I think, trying to remember what the guy's name was, but he was afraid to lean back as he was descending the mountain, and he wanted to cling to the wall. And every time he would lean into the wall, he would smash against it. And he had to have that counterbalance to lean out away from the wall. And he was doing fine, and he focused on looking up at the sky, and he was going down and down and down. He was doing fine. And then all of a sudden, the instructor from the bottom's like, hey, stop, look where your feet are at. And as he was coming down the mountainside, there's a giant hole in the wall. And if he kept going, he was going to go into that hole. And all of a sudden he got paralyzed because he looked down. And I thought this was a neat motto, and I had to think about it a little bit, that if you can't get out of it, get into it. It's like, well, wait a minute. What does it exactly mean? If you can't get out of the situation, dig in and really think about it and analyze what you're doing and how you're going to get out of it and embrace the moment. And I thought that was such a neat motto. And he's like, wait a minute, you want me to focus on a motto? I'm stuck here on the mountain. And he did. You know, the authors or the two instructors talked him through it. So I think that's a good note for all of us, you know, dig in, make that phone call, open a book. You know, if you're trying to study something new and you've been avoiding that book, open the book. If you're trying to pursue a job, you know, write a letter or fill out the job application, send a message to someone on your chicken list, do that vulnerable post that you've been avoiding. Or sometimes I don't want to get on my stories live, you know, just dig in, go to that live event. And then last part, failure as a teacher. It's hard, especially as we get older, to realize that we're not good at something, or it might take several attempts to get right. But it can teach us and use it just as a tool. You know, I don't like failure, I'll admit that. But you know, that first message is going to be awful, or that first post is going to be awful, or our first live on our stories, it's not going to be the best. But then you learn how to tweak it a little bit and be more natural. You learn over time how to handle an objection. If someone says, "Oh, I'm too busy," yeah, oh, okay, I love talking to busy people. You know, start engaging with them. And then I'll just, before I turn it over to everybody else, I wanted to ask this one question. And there's 5 of them, and they're all really good. And I hope you spent some time thinking about them. What is the most common response that you have to failure? And I think for me, as I thought about that a little bit, it's the embarrassment or the shame that, oh, geez, I stink at this, or I was not good at that. That's my first initial response. But it, you know, get over that, dig into it, and embrace failure. Let it teach you over time. So with that, I am going to mute, and I would love to hear your takeaways.
Oh, thank you, Steve. As always, we love hearing from you. It's nice to get another perspective and, you know, somebody who's in a different field other than healthcare too. It's always great to hear from somebody else. Um, this chapter, gosh, I mean, fear, I think, is one of the most paralyzing things in the world, right? And, you know, we're born with these innate things. And we were talking about this on something else. You know, we're born to be, you know, afraid of fear as a caveman response, you know, primal, fire, bad, don't touch, burn, you know. Well, then it got to be something useful. So leaning into that, we can cook our food, we can do these things and not be afraid of fear, but use it, lean into that. And now we can do so many more great things. So, you know, I think it's really important because there are so many things that are scary with this. I mean, like, seriously, do I want to put up a post where I look like crap? Not particularly, but you know what? That's relatable and leaning into that. And if people think that we're absolutely perfect, they're going to think that they can't do this. So, you know, we've got new people starting off. Taking away some of that fear factor is the single most important thing, right? So asking them, who are the 3 people you text the most? Can you reach out to them and offer this to them? Because those are the people that know you, love you, trust you the most. Can you help walk with them? You know, so getting people an early win is super duper helpful in taking away those fear factors for people. So if you can balance that fear out with some positives, you're like, okay, all right. And then it's really funny now, like looking back at our original post where we were pulling things off of Pinterest and they looked absolutely horrible. It's kind of horrifying to look back, but I should pull some up and put them up. But you know what? We were still growing. We were doing the things we're doing, you know, leading a book club. Not always everybody's strong point. Steve, I know you're an introvert. This is not something that you love necessarily, but you've grown and you've done it and you do a fantastic job. So those are some of my big takeaways.
Thank you, Jackie. And I like what you said about, you know, if we're polished and we're spending time perfect angle with our camera and we're fine tuning our text, that's not always relatable. But if we're natural and sometimes messy or sweaty or just raw and our posts aren't perfect, but we get it out there, that's often a lot more relatable to especially our friends and family. They're like, oh yeah, I know you.
For sure. And that's kind of what got me into this too. When I first ordered my products, I remember Elizabeth put me on the Pink Power team page, like, and I'm scrolling and didn't really know what I was looking for, but I remember seeing like this really raw post from Cody Helmer, like with her messy life and all the things, and was like, hey, she's a mom with all these things going on and like still figuring out how to make income for her family. Like, I can do that if she can be messy and crazy. Like, I can figure this out too. And I really liked the story about the different vases, how, in art class, they gave the challenge of there was two groups, one where you had to make one perfect vase, and then these people had to just make the most quantity. And then they ended up having the best vases because they learned by trial and error, and it's one of those things. I've heard that analogy before. And when I go to like make my messages, they're like, nope, because in 500 messages, I'm going to be a lot better at responding to things and, sending out a message to people versus if I was going to sit here and think about the perfect message, because we're people too and we're human and there's no like one perfect message, because otherwise we'd all be diamond if there was one perfect message. But you learn as you go. And you did a good job tonight, Steve, too. I appreciate hearing from you. Do you want to say hi real quick?
Hi.
Yep, that's exactly right, Melissa. And I love that analogy too with the vases. And I think that ties in really nicely with what Eric Worre does and, send out 100 messages like right now, just do it.
So many good points, Steve. Thank you for sharing tonight and leading. Yeah, failure is one of the things that I really have honed in since starting Plexus. Being a former perfectionist and people pleaser by nature, failure I would crush me pretty good. So learning that failure is just a lesson learned. Um, and it's part of success. They're mirrored together, and that's how we grow. Like, failure keeps us humble, success keeps us resilient, and they pair with each other, um, in order to succeed. And being able to teach that to my children, who my daughter also is a perfectionist, and both my children are people pleasers, teaching them, learn from this, don't let it define you, but grow. Failure only is negative if you don't learn from it and then reevaluate and continue on. So, yeah, this is a great chapter, probably one of my favorite ones.
Michelle, I love that you're bringing in the fact that you're seeing some of that and seeing it in your children too and helping them through it and showing them, hey, I know where this is going, and I was a perfectionist too, and let's learn from these failures, what we perceive to be failures. Sometimes it's not a failure at all. It's just, like I said, 6 inches between our ears. And yeah, I've got to do more of that, helping my children see through different things. Great example.
Okay, I gotta pop on again because it reminded me of something. So, we had before some people that I was coaching, and we're talking about get a post up, and they're like, "Well, I don't have enough time." I'm like, "Well, how long does it take you to do a post?" And it was like taking somebody like 2.5 hours to write up a post. I'm going, what in the world? What are you doing? But it was that perfectionist mindset, that was that fear that was stalling them from being able to grow, because they were so worried about doing the perfect post that they were taking so much time away from their family and from just reaching out to people. So it's definitely really important to look at what's holding us back, where what that fear is doing, because fear robs us of so many things. It robs us of success. It robs us of time. It robs us of joy. So, like you said, getting it out there and writing it out and going, yeah, I'm afraid of this. All right. You know, change that around. If your kid is afraid of the monster under the bed, look under the bed, see there's no monster. If they're still afraid of it, give them the fake monster spray so that they have something to battle that monster with. We need our own monster spray to battle those monsters with if we can't get over it ourselves. And that's where, your uplines can help you, your sponsors can help you. Or, before, when I first started this, and I always say, Courtney, her house looks perfect. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not like, I could never have white floors and white everything in my house. It'd be destroyed and everything looks perfect. I'm like, you're in a freaking magazine and I look like my house blew up, right? I live in the UP. We have dead animals on the wall. I can't do this. And then one day she spun the camera and she's like, Jackie, look at the mess behind me. So the thing that we have to remember is we might have a fear, but other people have it, but they're hiding it and they're overcoming it. And they're not allowing that to paralyze them. So hide the messy stuff behind you, move forward and do the daggone things. So those are my thoughts. More thoughts.
Thank you, Jackie. And I may have been guilty of rewriting and rewriting and rewriting a post, so it's just perfectly worded. Who else has something they would like to share?
I also like how he did talk about action and the consequences of inaction. But the consequence of action is reducing that fear, right? The more you do something, the more comfortable it becomes, the less fearful it becomes. So just do it anyways. Do it scared, and then eventually you won't be scared of it anymore.
I think there was something after convention or during the convention, and Rochelle was like, well, you just can't overthink everything and you need to just do it. Because I still am guilty of like overthinking and, well, I don't want to post until I have all my ideas together or something like that. And I definitely, like, when you guys see a picture of my house looking clean, it's a total sham. It's like the area that I cleaned off. I mean, it's just our house is so busy. There's like 6 people here like all the flipping time. And I think it was Michelle Thomas. So Michelle Thomas is a diamond, and her husband, he's might be a diamond too by now. But I remember in the early days, they did a video or a call or something. I caught a video, and she literally said that you just push everything to one side of the counter and take your picture, you know? And I know there's people like even in our team that have very like perfect thing, like Courtney Stoser, like everything is perfect all the time with all the right filters and the watermarks and all this stuff. Y'all, I don't have time for that or the energy. And I really started even just doing videos with like a mess in the background. Like here I'm making sourdough, but there's this mess of dishes behind me because that's my reality and that makes me more relatable, I guess. But anyway, good discussion. Great job, Steve. We've been busy with birthday parties today, so.
Oh, that's awesome. Birthday parties are always fun. So a couple more minutes. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the great discussion tonight. And I'll just add that if you're struggling with anything, a failure that's nagging in the background, you're in your cave and know that God is with you and you are not alone. Give it up to God. My pastor says that all the time. Offer everything up to God. And have a great night, and we'll see you on the next call.